Donkey Jaw Projects.
What's up, everybody? This is Marshall Lee of DonkeyJawProjects.com. My hairs are crazy. End of the day. And today is day 61 of 100 days of making comics. And I did my stuff today. Did some concept work for just still trying to figure out how the main character for Greener Grass, his name is Carl, I guess. Carl. And just trying to figure out his look, his cartoony look. I have to like design him twice because I want to make, or maybe even 3 times, because there's like different versions of him, sort of. So I don't know. I gotta keep doing some more drawing of him. But I think I got a good basic level. The only thing is he kind of looks like a midget, like, or I shouldn't say a midget, right? Sorry, I think you're supposed to say little people. No disrespect at all, you know. But he has that kind of proportion, I think, and I didn't really mean it to be like that. I just want a cartoony version, and his head's a little bigger, and his body's smaller, type of thing. So I don't know. We'll see. But I'll put a picture of that up right here. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of the character so far. I'm trying to do some turnarounds, and yeah, I just want to get him looking good and right for the comic. So anyways, let's see. Adam Lore was talking to me, or he commented in the last video I did, and he was saying, you know, we've been chatting a little bit about like comics and stuff and what comics we love, and I was actually kind of like, well, honestly, I've read a lot of comics and I don't like the comic stories a lot of times. More often than not, they're kind of weak, you know. They especially if you're just reading like 1 or 2 issues, it's like you don't really get a ton of story there unless they're like one-shot stories, or there's kind of the anthology thing or whatever. So he asked me, well, since we've been talking about that, I mean, and I'm not saying there are definitely good comic stories out there. I think partially I haven't read the ones that are good, that, you know, really hit me good, and partially, you know, it really is true, like they're kind of weaker sometimes. So I don't know. But that being said, he was asking what stories other than comics do you like and stuff like that. So I thought that was a pretty cool question, and I feel like I'm not going to be able to remember like all the stories that I love or whatever. But you know, I immediately thought of Shawshank Redemption, which I thought was really cool. I like stories that go somewhere, you know. Shawshank Redemption was cool. To me, that's like just a really great movie, and you know, you get to see. First of all, escaping from a prison is always interesting, but the way they went about it's more like about, you know, when you're in a kind of a hopeless situation, still living, still finding a way to live and be excited and have goals and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of like, where do we find the meaning in our life type of thing? Even if we're in a prison, can there be meaning? So, you know, that was kind of that, and I thought that was a pretty cool, interesting point in it that it explored. I don't know, Forrest Gump was really good. That was interesting. There's a lot of movies, you know, that I like. I loved a lot of movies that Tom Hanks did. He's definitely one of my favorite actors. I love the movie You Got Mail. It kind of seemed like a cheesy, like, catchphrase, you know, from the 90s or whatever, that they turned into a movie, but it wasn't a cheesy movie. It was a really good movie. Romance, you know, and just the way it all came together, and finding love in a very unlikely place, finding love with who you perceive to be basically your enemy. Yeah, I don't know. It really had an impact on me. I love that movie to this day. I'm trying to think of some other stories. Lord of the Rings. It's hard to say the book, because I tried to read the book when I was younger, and I couldn't keep track of all the names and stuff. And then when I saw the movie, you know, I really understood it better. And then I read the book after that and understood it better. But I don't know how, like, J.R.R. Tolkien kind of figured that out almost in a comic book story way, you know, like he kind of figured that out as he went, you know. You could kind of tell that the story doesn't really have 100% of a direction in the beginning, and then once they kind of get to where the elves are or whatever, I can't think of the name right now because I've been working and I'm tired, but once they get to that, you know, with the elves and stuff, and have the meeting and whatnot, and what we got to do, like, that's when, like, the story really seems to kick off. But I think they did a really awesome job in the movie of telling the story, and it's just really interesting to me because there's so many character arcs, and so those are all like almost individual stories, and they really weave in a really interesting way. And I think I like it because there's a lot of stuff that is inspired by biblical things, because he was a Christian, and so I recognize a lot of those things, and anybody can, because people are very familiar with the biblical stories, and you know, those biblical stories mean a lot to me, so I can see some of those concepts from the Bible in you know, the different character arcs, and just like Aragorn's story is one of my favorite parts of it. You know, Aragorn, he's like, he doesn't really want to be a hero, he doesn't want to be a king, he's afraid, you know, of like the he's afraid that he will turn corrupt like his forefathers basically have turned, and he doesn't want to be known as much, but he does want to do good in the world somehow, even if it's undercover, you know, and then under the name of Strider or something. So he's like this guy, but he ends up, because he doesn't want to, that's kind of his strength, because he doesn't want the things that would corrupt, that's what makes him the best kind of leader, you know. So I think that's a really interesting story. I'm trying to think, like, within there, I also really like Bilbo, or not Bilbo, Samwise. Tolkien even says, had admitted to saying that, you know, the real hero of the story is Samwise. It's not Frodo. Frodo gets corrupted, you know, and you know, he gives it a good shot and does his best, but he had to hold that ring for way too long, and it did in the end. Obviously, he decided not to destroy it, and circumstances made it so it did get destroyed. So there's that. I mean, even Gollum's story, like, they all have really good stories to them, and they all have really interesting character arcs. That's what I really like. Character arcs with meaning, I think, is something big that I like. And I think that is in comics, but I personally haven't seen a lot of it. One of the comics that actually did make a big impact on me was Sin City, and I thought that was clever. You know, it was interesting, and it made me enjoy a type of story that I normally would care less about. This whole, like, detective noir thing is just not my thing, but this was a different take on it, a different twist, and I don't know. I really like that story. But I didn't like end up reading the whole thing because it's really not my style of thing, to read necessarily. So I read the first good chunk of it. Trying to think like books and stuff. I was really impressed by Stephen King's writing. My dad actually used to read Stephen King to me when I was younger, and because I wanted to. He'd kind of tell me like a watered down version of the story, and then he'd sometimes read some of it, and obviously he wouldn't read certain parts and stuff, but he read a lot of Misery to me. And I remember watching the movie and being like, this is exactly how I envisioned like what we read, how I imagined it. So I just always loved the descriptive writing of Stephen King. I always thought like he does an amazing job at describing things, and he goes into a lot of detail, and maybe it's needless, some of it, I don't know, but it really builds the world and makes you feel like you're in it, So I really like that. Trying to think of like other stories that I love. I know there's many, especially movies, I've read some books. I'm trying to think of books I read. I mean, Narnia was cool. I love the concept of like the closet and all that, but I don't know. I think I don't necessarily love it. It was good. It was good. But it was a little bit forced. I don't know, a little bit forced, trying to get the Christian themes in there and stuff. I like how Tolkien did it. But C.S. Lewis, I love his writing. I love his actual like theological writing and stuff especially. But Narnia's good. I love the concept, but I feel like some of the concepts were a little less baked, I don't know. Maybe that's not a great way to say it, but so there's that. I'm trying to think of what else. Else is there? I mean, obviously the Bible stories, but a lot of those are more told as accounts, so they're like they're almost like news, or I don't know. They're not told in the way stories are told to us today a lot of times. In some ways they are. There is some of that in the Bible, but I don't know. But those are obviously very important to me. Trying to think though. I know there's more, but it's hard for me to think of all the stuff. I love Pulp Fiction. I love Tarantino's. I think I like stories that like take something that's common and do it with a bit of a twist. Although probably the most watched movie I've watched of Tarantino's is Kill Bill, which is a pretty straightforward story. I mean, he does a little bit of the twisting. He does do some of that, but there's a lot that makes Tarantino interesting. A lot more than just the basic story. Sometimes, he's got all the references and the dialogue and stuff. I really like him for dialogue. Kevin Smith, he did that one. I mean, I love Clerks. I love Clerks too. Some of the stuff's a little vulgar, but and graphic. But I do enjoy, his dialogue, and I enjoy him as a person. I'm so glad that he didn't pass away recently. I don't know if you guys heard or not. I didn't hear much buzz about it, but he had a heart attack that almost killed him. But he's all right now. But anyways, or a stroke or whatever. Yeah, it was a massive heart attack, I think. I don't know what the difference, but anyways, I love his storytelling style. Like, even when he's like, if you've ever watched his like stand-up, it's not exactly comedy. He just stands and talks, but it's like a stand-up comedy in some ways. But even just his way of telling a story, verbally, is great. I love his storytelling. And let's see what else. He had a movie. Is it called Red State? I feel like that's what it's called, Red State. I love that movie, and it's about this like corrupt church or whatever. And I need to watch it again because it's been a while. But it was that story blew me away watching it. I thought that was really cool. And it's interesting how he leaves the ending kind of for you to decide what actually ends up happening, and it's very interesting. And I think it puts a pretty negative light on, my faith, but it also it's showing. See, that's why I have this whitewash idea for my story, because I think that there are things that should be honestly told, because it's messed up, certain things, and I think, that when they show it, when they show my faith in a negative view, they're showing what inauthentic faith is. That's what it is, and what religion is without true faith and without true, like a true heart, towards what the scripture actually says. So I'm talking a lot about the Bible, but I guess that stuff is like inherent into how I love story. Twilight Zone, Adam Lore mentioned that in his comment, and that's definitely something I really love. Just short stories like that, there's other stuff like that too. And I love I don't know why, but there's something about having a bit of a twist to stories that I can't get away from. I really like that. Speaking about that, obviously, what was it? Is it Sixth Sense? The M. Night Shyamalan or whatever movie? That was pretty cool. I mean, it was pretty cool. It was definitely a cool twist. I like the movie Signs. That was a really cool movie. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that I do like. I mean, and I don't want to disparage comics, like pulp magazines, pulp books, and comic books. Like, they're kind of all the same thing to a certain degree. And those aren't the greatest, stories when it comes to like just big, like lots of character arc. I don't know, like a lot. Sometimes they are really great stories, but there's many times where it's kind of formulaic and stuff like that. I'm not saying I don't enjoy that. I do love that kind of thing. Like, those are some of my favorite kind of stories. But I especially like the radio ones too. Those are cool. I listen to a lot of like radio, or I have in the past listened to like a lot of radio horror stories or radio science fiction, and stuff that's made even now, and old stuff as well. I like those short stories, but those are kind of like junk food stories. Like, they're fun. They might not be as well developed as some kind of deep Lord of the Rings story, or I don't know. There's a lot of dramas that I just don't get into, because I feel like when I hear the word drama for a movie, I just get bored automatically. But they're probably good, a lot of these movies, but it just makes me think of like seriousness. And I'll try, what's good stories too is TV shows. There's a lot of good TV shows. I mean, Stranger Things, the first season was really good. The second season was cool, but it was okay. Man, I'm trying to think of, there's so many good TV shows these days. Grey's Anatomy. We've been watching that. Now, I'm not a big like doctor show thing, but my wife loves like certain things like doctor shows. She was really into Grey's Anatomy, Law and Order. I don't usually like crime shows that are straight up crime. There's got to be some kind of twist. Like, I loved Monk, because that was like a detective show, but there's a twist that he's like, OCD or whatever it is. And like so that was made it interesting. There was but yeah, Grey's Anatomy is great because like we would sit there and try to pick out the themes while we were watching it, because they're always, not always, but most times there's a theme and everybody is going through that same theme, every character in a different way for different reasons. The character arcs are great. It's a really good, if you want to like watch a show that helps you understand character arcs and like themes and motivations and things from different kinds of characters, that's a great show for that. And you get a lot out of each episode, you know. So yeah, that's, I mean, in a nutshell, that's like me just kind of listing off a lot of shows and stuff, and movies and whatnot. But that's, you know, that's the kind of stories I dig. And I don't really know. Rocky was one of my favorite stories ever. The first Rocky, and beautiful. And then just the story of how Stallone was able to get that going, you know, and make that happen. And I like stories of people's lives, you know, especially in the beginning parts, you know. So yeah, that's kind of what I dig. I don't know if I can pinpoint why I like certain things yet. Still working on learning that. Stories are very hard thing to pin down. It's like always moving. So anyways, that's about all I have to say about that for now. But I appreciate you guys checking stuff out, checking out the episodes, and I hope you dug this. Let me know what some of your favorite stories are. I'd love to check them out, you know. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. Peace out.